You've heard of Pearl Harbor, but did you know America suffered another invisible attack? One that didn't involve bombs, armies, or enemies, and yet it reshaped the mind of an entire nation. In this video, you'll uncover the forgotten scars hiding beneath everyday American life, scars most people don't even know they carry. Before we begin, comment below, what do you think is America's most haunting psychological mystery? Most Americans think the biggest threats in our history came from wars, disasters, or enemies overseas. But what if the deadliest wound was a silent one, passed from parents to children, through memories we don't talk about and trauma we don't understand? Today we're diving into America's silent epidemic, the hidden psychological scars stretching from the Great Depression to Vietnam to 9/11 and still shaping the country today. This isn't a conspiracy. This isn't fiction. This is real history, and its effects are still visible in America's anxiety levels, addictions, economic fears, and even the way people vote. Let's begin with something almost no one realizes. America has lived through more national-scale psychological trauma in 100 years than most nations experience in 500. The Great Depression. In the 1930s, 1 in 4 Americans lost their jobs. Millions were hungry. Families slept in cars, barns, or on railroad tracks. Children were abandoned because parents couldn't feed them. What people forget is this. Those children grew up terrified of losing everything again. They passed that fear to their children, who passed it again and again and again. This isn't guesswork. It's science, intergenerational trauma. Then came World War II. Americans who returned from Europe and the Pacific carried nightmares they never talked about. They built families, but not with peace, with unspoken fear, anger, and emotional distance. Back then, no one used the word PTSD. They called it shell shock, battle fatigue, a man who couldn't handle it. But behind closed doors, there were tremors, nightmares, violent reactions to fireworks, parents who could never fully hug their kids again because their bodies refused to relax. America didn't just win World War II, it absorbed it. But here's where things get strange. Psychologists later discovered that children of traumatized soldiers show stress responses even if they never heard the war stories. Their brains literally adapted to fear that wasn't theirs. This means some Americans alive today carry emotional reflexes formed by a war their grandparents fought. And yet, this is not the biggest shock in the story. Vietnam changed everything. Unlike World War II, returning soldiers weren't greeted with parades. They were insulted, spit on, rejected. Imagine this. You survived jungles, booby traps, napalm, ambushes. You see friends blown apart. Then you come home, step into an airport, and the first thing you hear is someone shouting, "Baby killer." Thousands of veterans suffered mental collapse, addiction, homelessness. But America didn't want to hear their stories, so the trauma turned inward, into families, marriages, communities. Vietnam wasn't just a war, it was a psychological earthquake, and the aftershocks are still visible today. But what happened next shocked everyone, because Americans finally realized you didn't need a battlefield to create national trauma. Sometimes the trauma came to us. Most people talk about 9/11 in terms of physical destruction, but the psychological impact, it was unlike anything in modern American history. Millions watched the towers fall live on television. Children sat in classrooms wondering why teachers were crying. Workers froze at their desks, terrified their city was next. Airports, sirens, low-flying planes all became psychological triggers. Within hours, America's collective mind changed. Fear became normal. Suspicion became instinct. The world felt permanently unsafe. Researchers found that stress levels across the U.S. spiked to match those of people in active war zones. This wasn't just trauma, it was a national-level rewiring of the American brain. But here's the part almost nobody talks about. The trauma didn't stay in 2001. Children born after 9/11, who never saw it, never lived it, still show higher baseline anxiety than children in the 1980s or 1990s, meaning America passed the fear into the next generation without saying a word. Today, America faces something psychologists call the silent epidemic, an epidemic not of viruses, but of memory, fear, and unprocessed grief. Consider this. A nation shaped by the Great Depression is terrified of economic collapse. A nation shaped by war is constantly preparing for threats. A nation shaped by 9/11 sees danger everywhere. Even social media amplifies fear, panic, division, all feeding into a psychological loop created decades ago. And here's the twist. America's current mental health crisis didn't begin today. It began 100 years ago. We're just now noticing it. Here's the question we never ask. How many of our fears are actually ours, and how many are inherited? Think about it. Do you fear losing your home even if your finances are fine? Do you overreact to loud noises? Do you feel a constant sense of pressure even when things are okay? Do you worry about the future in ways you can't explain? You might not be anxious. You might be carrying your grandparents' anxieties. You might be living with ghosts of history. And here's the real mystery. If trauma can pass from one generation to the next, what else can? Resilience, strength, hidden memories, patterns of survival. America might not just carry scars, it might carry warnings, coded inside our psychology. Warnings from the past, about the future. If you love forgotten American history, you'll love what's coming next week. Because this story, America's silent epidemic, is only one chapter in a much bigger pattern. This was just one forgotten psychological disaster. Want to hear about the next hidden American tragedy? Subscribe now. The next story drops next week, and trust me, you won't believe how deep it goes.